and I know many of you. Today we are having Jason Wheeler present how to age in place successfully. So I'm very excited about this presentation. Let me tell you a little about Jason. Jason is the executive director of the Assist Inc. Community Design Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. Founded in 1969, Assist plays a critical role in community-based design in Utah, shaping shared transportation routes and advocating for affordable housing along the Wasatch Front. Assist also provides design and emergency home repair services for low-income, disabled, and elderly families and individuals. Awesome, Jason. That's super cool. I'm learning about that in school, so it's super awesome. Prior to joining Assist, Jason worked as an architect at Alley Painter
Makedo.
Thank you very much. Architecture in Omaha, Nebraska, focusing on housing for seniors, historic preservation, and custom home design. From 2010 to 2013, Jason was an Enterprise Rose Architectural Fellow at Color Country Community Housing in St. George, Utah, improving the energy efficiency of affordable housing in the desert Southwest, and at Enterprise Community Partners Incorporated in New York City in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy. While in New York, Jason directed the Far Rock, which is an acronym, design competition, and helped create the Sandy Design Help Desk Centers as part of Enterprise's Superstorm Sandy Task Force. Jason holds a Master's of Architecture degree from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, all right, and a BS degree in Construction Management from Brigham Young University. All right, Jason, you've been all over the place doing great stuff. I will pass the time to you, and you can tell us about aging in place successfully.
Thank you, Paige. So can you guys see my splash screen, which hopefully should say Assist Community Design Center on it? All right, very good. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you guys virtually today and to have a chance to talk a little bit about aging successfully in place. This is something that I aspire to do, but have not yet achieved, so I'm still working on this, but it's interesting. I have, as Paige indicated, lived in a lot of different places. For the first 20 years of my adult life, I moved about once every 3 years and have been around a bit. But before that, the first, I guess, 18 years of my life, I lived in northern Utah in Cache Valley, and my parents still live there. And grew up in this little town called Hyde Park, and living there kind of helped me develop an appreciation for what community means. Hyde Park was a very tight-knit community. People were on the streets walking all the time. You know, we would see our neighbors and know our neighbors, and at night we played night games with all the other kids on the street, and my parents would sit out on the lawn in their lawn chairs, you know, chatting with the other adults that lived on the street. And so this idea or sense of community, I think, was instilled in me from the time that I was really young. And it's been interesting to watch the neighborhood that I grew up in grow, because when I first, you know, grew up there, when I was born there, it was a lot of young families that had kids in similar situations to me. And interestingly enough, our neighborhood has stayed very stable over the last 4 decades, and that probably 90% of the people that lived on that block when I was a kid, in terms of the homeowners, are still there and are dear friends of my parents. And there's this real kind of sense of community and belonging that exists when you have deep roots in a community. And so when we talk about aging in place, at least in my mind, that means this concept of being able to live where we want to live and to live with the people we want to live with, and to have these networks of social resilience that can help us be successful in times of difficulty or trauma. Paige mentioned briefly that I spent some time in New York after Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Sandy, and it was interesting to be out there and to see these different communities that have been impacted. New York City looks a lot different from Utah. when we think about a community in New York, oftentimes it might be just a building. And there was one building in particular in the Rockaways that was right on basically the ocean front, and after the storm had lost power, and this building was probably a 25-story tall building, predominantly senior housing, and it was run by a Jewish community group that was out there, and they were without power for a couple of weeks. And in New York, when you don't have power, that also means you don't have water, because they need the pumps to pump the water up to the top of the buildings, to to the water towers that are on top of the buildings, to create the water pressure for the units inside. And in this case, they had no running water in the building because of lack of power. And so we had seniors that were in their 70s and 80s, walking down 12, 15, 19, 25 flights of stairs in the dark, walking across the beachfront through the sand to the ocean and filling buckets with water, and then carrying them back up those flights of stairs to their residences so that they could flush the toilets. And it just kind of really hit me about how much our ability to age in place oftentimes is very closely linked to the physical environment in which we live. And interestingly enough, in terms of residential housing, oftentimes our homes can be prisons just because of the way that they're designed. When we get into public environments, accessibility is something that's been mandated since the 1990s. But in residential home construction, there is no accessible code. And when we're young and healthy and able to move around a lot, it doesn't really bother us that much. We don't think about it, maybe until we have a grandparent come and visit. But as we get older, things like steep flights of stairs or lack of handrails start to make a difference in our ability to be able to stay safely in our home. So with that kind of preamble, our organization Assist, as I mentioned, was mentioned by Paige, is a neighborhood or a community design center. That basically means we're a nonprofit architecture office. We were established in 1969 by the American Institute of Architects and by the University of Utah School of Architecture. And so the company's been around for a long time, over 50 years. And we're located in downtown Salt Lake City, just right across the street from the Leonardo Art Museum. This is our current staff, so we're kind of small despite having been around for 50 years. I'm not sure if you put all of us together if we'd hit 50 years in age, but maybe something close to that. But it's we're a small staff, but we do a lot of fun and good work. So just a kind of quick overview about what a public interest design or community design organization is and how they differ from a traditional design firm. So normal architecture practice would just take on any architecture project. Our office is really mission oriented, meaning that we're focused on providing services to the communities here in Salt Lake County specifically and throughout Utah. We're community based, so any of the projects that we do try to respond to the needs of the community in which we live. So we're not just kind of out to hire for any project. What we want to do is community based type projects, and we try to engage with the community in the work that we do. And that looks like a lot of different things, but some of our design projects, really include community organizing and community meetings, like we did with an affordable housing competition in Atlanta, Georgia, a few years ago. As far as community design goes, though, when we think about designing spaces in Salt Lake County or in Utah, we do a lot of work in individual homes, but we also historically have tried to look at aging in place from a holistic community standpoint, meaning that as people get older, sometimes, they're no longer able to drive. I have a good friend that's a neighbor that's 92, and she just had her license taken away because her eyesight's getting too poor to be able to drive. And now it's difficult for her to get around places. And so friends are able to help provide transit. But there are other options that can exist in our community when good community design is implemented, and that includes public transportation routes and benches, that people can sit on and rest when they're out walking. So we've been engaged in that. And we work on the other end of the spectrum too, in terms of designing daycare for littles that are just beginning to age. So, but in terms of our services that are really applicable to I think the audience is here today. As a nonprofit organization, we actually receive about 85% of our funding through federal grants. And in Salt Lake County, we have a little over $1 million a year that we're able to spend on providing emergency home repairs for low-income families or households to help them be able to stay in their homes. And this includes things like if your roof starts to leak and you're on a fixed income and you're looking at a roof repair that maybe costs $5,000 or $6,000 or maybe $10,000 or $15,000 if you're replacing your whole roof, and you're on Social Security and have an income of $1,300 a month, that's an entire year or more of income to be able to replace your roof. And we recognize that very few people on fixed incomes have the resources to be able to do that. And so we provide emergency home repairs. Part of this is motivated by this desire to stabilize neighborhoods. We want to help people be able to stay in their homes, both younger families as well as people that are aging. And so we'll fix roofs, we'll fix electrical issues, we'll repair or replace furnaces, repair broken glass if you have a plumbing leak, or if your plumbing is backed up, we can come and resolve those issues as well. And we also provide accessibility retrofits in terms of ramps and other access to homes. And for income qualifying families, we provide those services free of charge. So there's no cost to that. And we also do these specific home modifications related to aging in place. So things like installing grab bars and handrails, ramps, low-rise steps, comfort height toilets and showers, things that basically just take a home that might be start to become difficult to navigate and make it easier for you to live in. So, and this really, I think, is reflective of kind of looking back on where I started about my parents and the community that they live in. When there's this Bipartisan Policy Institute that did a study on this, and 88% of people that responded said that what I'd like to do is stay in my current residence for as long as possible. And a similar number of people said what I'd really like to do is to remain in my local community for as long as possible. So not only do people want to stay in their local community, they also want to stay in their home as much as possible. But as it relates to that, 70% of adults over 65 will need long-term services and support at some point in their lifetimes. And there is this increasing trend for homelessness amongst older adults as well. And these issues of not being able to afford to make repairs in your home is one of those things that can contribute to homelessness, especially in our community where the rental housing market is so expensive right now that if for some reason, a senior that's on fixed income finds that they need to sell their home and move out of their home because they can't afford to maintain it anymore, all of a sudden they find themselves trying to compete in an overpriced rental market with very few good options. So anyway, this idea of aging in place then is the idea of continuing to live in one's own home and neighborhood safely, independently, and comfortably, regardless of age, income, or ability level. And eliminating architectural barriers through strategic intervention is probably one of the most important things that we can do. 46% of people with disabilities report that they feel isolated from their community, and the main reason for that is because of architectural barriers, meaning it makes it difficult for them to get out and engage with their neighbors. And so that's really, again, where our services come in. So any questions so far?
You're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
Okay, I'll just keep running. So what I'm going to talk about now is just some specific items that we provide and things that relate to safely aging in place. I've been at ASSIST for about 6 years, and the prior director there, his name was Roger Borganicht, and he was there for 30 years. And something that he always used to say is that once you fall, you're always afraid. And I've done a lot of backcountry hiking and canyoneering and rappelling, and it's always interesting to me that when I go out on some sort of a hiking or rappelling adventure, when I'm confident in what I'm doing and moving my way through, through whatever obstacles I'm going through, I find that it's quite easy and enjoyable. But every now and then I psych myself out and I get scared about something. And the moment I get afraid in a situation, it's a scary moment because suddenly it feels like I'm that much more likely to slip and fall, and my footing becomes less sure. And I think that the same is very much true for us in much less dangerous environments like our homes. And that is as soon as we start to develop fear and we move trepidatiously throughout our homes, um, it seems like for some reason that just increases our chances of having another fall. And so our goal, or one of the things that we really encourage people to consider as they're looking to age in place, number one, first and foremost, is to do whatever you can to avoid having that first fall. Because, if somebody falls at home and breaks a hip or, a shoulder or something, they find themselves in rehab for a while, and oftentimes it becomes very difficult for them to return home. So avoiding the first fall is number one. And one of the most important things that we can do for that is have things to hold on to as you move around your home. So one of the things we do is install handrails at porch stairs and entries, just to give people something to hold on to as they navigate steps. Interestingly enough, many homes that are constructed in the U.S., especially older homes, don't have any handrails on entries. So something else that we look at is, I don't know, some of my slide transitions like to transition on their own, but watching out for a little this. We'll just go for this one. Little changes in elevation can be tripping hazards, and so providing ways to avoid those little tripping hazards can be good too. And that might be something as simple as a little wedge ramp that can be installed to help get over these surfaces without tripping. Another thing that we do is provide low-rise steps for people that are still walking, not using a wheelchair, but they have a harder time lifting your knees up to get up into, over each step. And so we'll build steps with much longer treads and lower rises. Step is easier to make and not so hard on knees. And sometimes even design them so that a walker can kind of travel down, where you can place the walker on each step. For people that are using wheelchairs, we'll install ramps in front of their homes. And just as it's always curious to me when we go out to somebody's home and we talk about putting a ramp in. I think they're often surprised at how long a ramp has to be. And we've seen all sorts of temporary ramps with all sorts of slopes, and we'll show a photo here in just a minute of that. But ideally, in order to meet commercial code, you would want to have a foot of ramp for every inch of rise. So that means, often homes here in Utah tend to be about 30 inches, the main level about 30 inches off of the ground. And that means that you need a ramp that's at least 30 feet long in order to accommodate that. Now, this ramp is one that we saw out at a home, and its slope was slightly steeper than 1 to 12. It was about 1 to 2. And this particular residence, there was an older gentleman and his wife that lived here, and they actually were taking care of, they were the full-time caregivers for their granddaughter who had cerebral palsy and was confined to a wheelchair basically all the time. And so every day before work, the grandfather would help take his granddaughter out of the home. And they built this ramp to try to make it easier. You can see over here on the left, there's actually an almost 8-inch step that goes up into the first door. So they have to get down that step, come over, and then down the steep ramp to get her onto the bus to go to her school program. And he actually fell off this ramp one day as he was trying to navigate down it to get his granddaughter to the bus and hurt himself. And at that point, they reached out to us. So we came back and built a ramp for them that with some steps over on the right. That's a much more appropriate length and safer. This is another example of a home where the homeowner had muscular dystrophy, and some neighbors came out and tried to build a little ramp for him to make it easier to get out. You'll notice it just lands here in the grass, and so they had to, figure out how to uh, get from there to the driveway. And the truth is, as soon as he got here, his wheelchair was sinking into the grass and just getting stuck. So so we came back and built a porch out at the front that they could be out on, and then a much larger ramp. These split entry homes are really, really difficult to try to manage accessibility with. But their family loved it, and they made a cute little handprint impressions. So something else, if there's not enough space for a ramp because it takes so long, is we can install vertical platform lifts. We do have a program that's our Aging in Place program that's funded by Salt Lake County that allows us to do some of these larger jobs, and we're a little bit limited, so we can only do about 6 of these really big jobs per year, but something like this would allow us to put in a vertical platform lift for somebody to get into their home if they don't have space for a ramp. It's important to have railings not just outside, but inside as well. Even if it's just a single step, having something to hold on to is so valuable, and having handrails on your stairs inside is very good. Residential code only requires handrails on one side, so sometimes it's best to make sure that a second handrail gets installed and it's on both sides. This is something else that we've seen used. These can sort of work. Sometimes they don't. I don't know. They don't work as well as you'd hope, I guess, and you have to be able to get into and out of them, which requires a certain degree of flexibility and nimbleness. But it can be a way to get up and down stairs if there's not another good option. So sometimes these vertical platform lifts or elevators will install inside of homes as well. This one on the right is kind of fun because when it drops down to the lower level, you can actually, it just looks like part of the floor. In some instances, we'll help people that are experiencing severe disabilities and no longer able to move without assistance. And so we'll install these ceiling track systems that will allow for, the ability for a caregiver, for example, to help a spouse or a partner or a child move from the bed to the bathroom or transfer to a wheelchair. One of the biggest barriers that we see in homes is that most bathrooms have doors that are 24 inches wide or 28 inches wide, so 2 foot 4 inches, and a standard wheelchair won't fit through that. And not just wheelchairs, but walkers oftentimes don't fit through that. And so we can come in and either widen doors, or else that's right here on the right is what's called a swing clear hinge that allows that door to open all the way out of the opening. Excuse me. And gives a couple of extra inches of clearance. We've also seen, this is just something to be aware of, and I've seen this with my own grandparents as well as with many of the peoples that we've served over the past little while. Most bathroom doors swing in, and often bathrooms are quite small inside, and we've had several instances where somebody has fallen while they've been in the bathroom and they've fallen up against the door, which has made it basically impossible to get the door open. And so firefighters or family members have had to tear open a hole in the adjacent wall in order to get in and help their family member. And so one of the things that we'll do is have the bathroom doors swing out instead of swing in. So we'll reverse the swing on those doors. And that way, if somebody were to fall in the bathroom while they're in there, you can still get the door open if it's not locked, or even if it's locked, you can pick the lock and it doesn't have to swing in. It also makes it easier if somebody's using a chair to be able to get that door open and navigate around inside of the bathroom. Sliding doors can also achieve this effect, or pocket doors. This is not a very nice toilet, but one things that we do is install high-rise or comfort height toilets. It just makes it easier to stand up from, and then we'll put grab bars in adjacent to these. This is a little retrofit right here in the middle. The one on the right is kind of the same. That gives you a little extra height, but the challenge with both of these is they become difficult to clean and a little unsanitary. So these comfort height toilets help solve that problem. Again, going back to this idea of falling, having grab bars, especially in high slip locations, you know, in your bath tub next to the toilet, kind of a vertical bar right next to the entry to the bathtub or shower, really can help prevent a fall in the bathroom. For people that are having a hard time getting over the edge of their tub, we'll either install a shower, or one thing we can do is actually come in an afternoon, do what we call a tub cut. That basically makes it so that it converts the tub into a step-in shower. The nice part about that being that it's a little less expensive than pulling the tub out and putting in a full shower, and it's really much less disruptive to the people that live in the home because this can be done again in an afternoon. We have a lot of people ask us about these walk-in tubs. You know, they might like soaking and taking a bath, but this is something that we don't typically recommend just because it's a little bit difficult to get in and out of them. And then once you're in, you have to close the door and wait for the water to fill up. And then if you need to get out in the middle of your bath for any emergency or other reason, you have to actually sit and wait for the water to drain all the way out before you're able to open the door and get out of the tub. So, in addition to to those tub cuts, we will remove tubs and put in here what we call a curb shower. So basically, it's just like a shower that has a little bit of a curb that you would step over, maybe 4 inches tall. And for people that are using wheelchairs, we'll put in these roll-in showers so that there's no barrier to get in. Shower wands are great. Lots of times we'll install these on grab bar sliders, so that makes it easier to reach. And then shower benches can also be helpful when you're taking a bath, just to make sure that you've got something stable to sit in and hold on to. For individuals that are using chairs, sometimes we'll come in and remove the vanities and install roll under vanity where you can roll under with a wheelchair, and it makes it easier to actually navigate around in the bathroom as well. Because you can kind of pull your chair in underneath it and then back out and be able to change direction. So, and the same can be true for kitchens. This just would provide somebody that's using a chair, you know, a quick ability to be able to continue to engage in activities that they've previously engaged in, like cooking and washing dishes. You'll see over here on the left that there's a light switch box underneath the cooktop, and that is to turn on the fan controls so that if somebody's using a chair, they can't stand up and reach the fan controls. So something else that we'll recommend is wall-mounted ovens with these breadboards that can pull out underneath them, just to make it a little bit easier for people that are using chairs to continue to cook. And again, in the idea of fall prevention, it's much easier to get things out of drawers than it is out of cupboards when you're having to bend over or reach into the back. And these notch drawers with the notch sides actually make it a little bit easier to get things out when they're higher up, because you can't see down into them. So, and then all of these concepts I think can apply to new construction as well, and this is something that we advocate for with new home builders, is to incorporate somewhere in the home a no-step entry. It doesn't have to be at the main door. It could be at a side patio door or through the garage. But what that does is that immediately enables the homeowner to continue to live in their home into the future, no matter what physical condition they end up in. So there's just a construction detail example that will show home builders sometimes about how they can do that. And this is a home that I designed while I was in Nebraska that was designed for a couple that was in their 50s. They were restaurant owners, or are restaurant owners, but they wanted to be able to stay in this home until until they pass. And so we designed this. It actually does have an elevator on the inside to get up to the second level, but the point of showing this image is that this no-step entry here. It doesn't have to look out of the ordinary. It's easy to incorporate that into new construction. I see there's a hand raised.
Yeah, Stella.
Mhm.
Stella, if you want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to ask your question. I see that you're unmuted. Oh, well, maybe that was a mistake. Or Stella, we can't hear you. You can always put your question in the chat too. All right, I'll check the chat, Jason.
Okay, that sounds good. So as you're looking, if for some reason you were looking to move, things to look for in these homes is making sure that they're low thresholds and that you have enough width to be able to get through the doorways, if you were to end up using a wheelchair at some point in the future. So this just shows usable bathrooms, space to navigate with high sinks and low sinks and transfer benches. And then something that people don't think about oftentimes is putting the light switches and the outlets in a reachable way, including thermostats and other controls. So having those outlets high enough that you don't have to bend over too far to be able to plug them in or use them. Looking for spaces that have wider hallways. Again, it's challenging to do this in an existing home, but having wider hallways can make it much easier to navigate around your home as well. And then, I think important in this is making sure that you still have access to your yard spaces, so that you're not just stuck in your home, and things like having an accessible patio outside can do a lot to improve quality of life. So that's basically what I had today, and I'm happy to answer any other questions you have. And as I mentioned, our office is located in Salt Lake, and we have funding to do aging in place modifications through most of Salt Lake County, and are really happy to connect with any of you and come to your homes and perform like an assessment or just provide ideas about things you can do to make your home safer to be able to continue to live there.
Thanks, Jason. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, you're welcome to unmute yourself or raise a hand.
I'm curious what the process is to get in contact with you, and like what the time is. If you got in contact with you, how long would it take for someone to come out and give you an assessment?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I'll put our phone number in the chat or in our website. So assistutah.org is our website. And our office phone is 801-355-7085. And typically our process, if somebody is looking for us to come out, is just to give our office a call, and we would schedule an appointment and come to the home, do an assessment. If you're looking for just, advice or input, or, we would provide that on site, on the spot. If you're looking for us to provide any sort of architectural plans, then we would go back to the office and, using measurements we've taken at your home and photographs, and prepare architectural drawings of any modifications that we would propose making. And then we would send them out to the homeowner for them to review. To do a job, I would say anywhere from a day, if it's something small like a plumbing leak or backed up toilet or something like that, to a couple of weeks if it's if it's a roof repair, if it's like a furnace that's gone out, typically we're able to get those replaced within a few days to a week. Water heaters, we try to be pretty fast on. Plumbing leaks we're probably fastest on just because that can cause a lot of damage. And so we try to make sure that we get plumbing leaks taken care of right away. Larger accessibility retrofits. So installing grab bars doesn't take us very long, but if we were to come in and remodel your bathroom, for example, it could take us as long as 4 to 5 months from the time that you apply until we're able to get a contractor out there to do the work. And the main reason for that is just because of our current construction climate. It hasn't always been that way, but we're having such a hard time having enough contractors to do our work that's a challenge. So we do have several, we've got about 30 contractors that we work with that are a mix of plumbers, roofers, electricians, mechanical like HVAC or air conditioning and heating contractors. We have an excavator that will replace, external sewer pipe if you have sewer pipe that fails. But for our larger jobs, we only have really 2 contractors we're working with right now, and they've got other projects they're doing as well. So it takes us a little longer to get those done, unfortunately. But normally we're able to come out to your home from the time that you call within 2 weeks, if not sooner.
And Jason,
Is
I have
that
a question.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Becky.
Oh, I was just going to say, is that the same for emergency home repairs?
Yeah, so for the same process for emergency home repairs, and again, the emergency home repairs are a lot faster than an accessibility retrofits. If you've got a plumbing leak, if you call us and you have a plumbing leak, we can often get out with, sometimes the same day, sometimes within a day, and get a contractor out within a day or 2 to get those taken care of. Assuming we have funding available. So our funding does get obligated pretty quickly. We've been using this funding, the same source of funding for over 40 years, and we anticipate every July kind of getting a new round of funding available. So sometimes, if we have committed all of our funding, people may have to wait to have us provide services until the new fiscal year starts.
And so, Jason, I'm sorry if I misunderstand. Are your services only or primarily for people who qualify financially, or is it if somebody who doesn't necessarily qualify for your funding based on their income, can they still call you and say, hey, we want to get a ramp put in, and they just pay for it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if somebody is over income in terms of what we can pay for, we would still come to the home and perform, an aging in place assessment, and there's no charge for that. And we can help provide design services, but we wouldn't be able to pay for any modifications. So we're not a contractor; we're an architecture office, and we could refer people to contractors, but we don't actually self-perform any of the work that we do in terms of going out and doing the builds. So anyway,
But you would
we've done maybe.
You would be in a pro, if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, we need some changes in our house, even if they were financially well off, I could still say, hey, you should go to Assist. They can help assess your home and get the process started, kind of a thing.
That's absolutely right. Yep.
Great. And Jason,
Stella, I
have a question. It says, I don't know if you can read it. It says, I was curious about how Assist Utah is funded, grant money, and such a great service. I agree with that. Can you tell us how you're funded?
So the federal government provides what's called community development block grant funding to communities in every state. And that funding comes from, it's a per capita amount that each state receives. And then local communities within a state get to determine how that funding is spent. And so through a process of community feedback, County, Salt Lake City, West Jordan, Taylorsville, and Sandy each to receive their own kind of allocation of funding. And they have all identified neighborhood stabilization as a high priority. and that includes aging in place and repairing older homes. And so we apply basically each year for grant funding through those different municipalities, and so far they keep giving us money to help people out, so that's good. But it is through the federal government. We do some fee for service work. So our larger architecture projects, we just act like a traditional architecture firm on, and we'll design those. We charge an architecture fee, and then we use the profit or income from that to help subsidize some of the other work that we do around the state. So that helps pay for some of our things that aren't reimbursable through community development block grant funding.
Excellent. Stella, hopefully that answered you. There you go. Wonderful. Any other questions for Jason about Assist or anything else that he might be able to help you with? Jason, thank you. This actually has been really informative. Like you said, I'm going through the gerontology program at the U, and one of the things we're talking about right now is accessibility. And I think, I came into it thinking only in the home and not community planning and those kind of things, and realizing how important all of those things are, right? I mean, even if you can move around your house, if you can't move around your community, then, it's not what good is it, but it's if you want to be part of your community, like you said, having places to sit or having places where walkers or wheelchairs can get through, or not sidewalks. I mean, the kind of things that keep people from getting outside. And it's interesting when you open your world up, how much input you get going, oh, wow, this is from here. And this is, so I really appreciate it. It's very timely. And I think this is something that we can definitely use with our participants in this webinar, obviously, but at the senior centers as well. So thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think you make a great point. It's interesting that something like a bench actually improves walkability, because you think, oh, but benches are sitting, not walking. But if you have a place to rest, it makes it so much more likely that you'll be willing to go out and go for a walk somewhere. Yeah, I would just a couple of kind of final thoughts. One is, some of you who have listened to this presentation today might think, this doesn't really apply to me, but the reality is that you probably all have friends or neighbors that this might apply to, or family members, and so might benefit from our services. Feel free to pass on our information to them. And the second is that Salt Lake City in particular, and then some of the other communities in the county, are being proactive about building new, what we would call active transportation routes, walkways, sidewalks. They're rebuilding streets, and part of rebuilding streets require that they incorporate a certain amount of accessibility, and oftentimes they solicit community feedback in those processes. And many of us are busy, and it's hard to make the time to go engage in those, but pay attention in your neighborhood and community, and if it seems like your city is going to be rebuilding, a streetway or has some other project and they're soliciting community feedback, engage in that process and let them know, what things help you and what things are barriers are difficult for you. And the cities want to know, they want to hear your feedback, and sometimes they actually listen and incorporate it. So.
It's so true. And another thing, because we don't think about that, right? When we see those notices that it might actually affect our ability to get around the community. My mom actually lives in Texas in an active adult community, one of those, sun cities basically. And she was just telling me the other day, she doesn't like to go out walking because there's no benches. There's no places where you can take a rest on your way. And so the only option is to take a walker, one of those walkers that has a chair, which isn't just a fine option. But I think it's interesting that she's even in a place designed for older adults, albeit active, but still. And that really important piece is missing. So I think all of us kind of have that opportunity to voice those opinions. And Jason, I appreciate you reminding us that we are that voice in our community to say, hey, this is important to us. So thank you so much. This has been really eye-opening and informative. I really appreciate your time, Jason. And if there's no other questions, we will leave you all. Oh, let's see. Do we have something next week? Did you send me something? Yes, next week. Next week, let me just make a quick announcement. Next week's Tuesday at 2 is holiday tips for caregivers of loved ones with Alzheimer's. And this is being presented by our very own Suzanne Lewis, who's awesome. She's one of the health educators here. So the holidays can be tricky and an overwhelming time for people experiencing dementia. Learn some tips to make the most of the holiday season. So I hope you'll join me and Suzanne